In today's show, the shorthanded Trailblazers are still searching for answers on a defense that is struggling. But if nothing else, they have drastically changed their identity so far. Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You're listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making this show your first listen. Coming at you each and every weekday, Monday through Friday. So make it a part of your daily routine. Make it your first listen. Tell your friends to do the same. It's Locked On Blazers, your team every day. In today's show, I want to talk about the Blazers' struggling defense, a shorthanded roster, and sort of the drastic change in their identity, or at least their style is probably the right word. A drastic change in their style from the beginning of the season and who they wanted to be to who they are now over the last 10 games, and particularly over the last 4 or 5. We'll get into all that. Pressing, zone, a little bit of audio from Thiago Splitter when I asked him about exactly this situation pregame, heading into their game against the Chicago Bulls, where they played a ton of zone, and then they went back to kind of what they do best, and it worked in the fourth quarter. We'll talk a little bit about that. And then I want to look ahead to a road trip. Blazers head out for 3 on the road, Golden State, Oklahoma City, and then Milwaukee over the weekend, Friday, Sunday, Monday. We will look ahead to that. And then I'm going to, this is spoiling a take for later in the show, but while if things are really bad, I don't think the broader expectations for the Blazers have shifted all that much. We will get into all of that in today's program. A Friday show for you to head into your own weekend. A Blazers-filled weekend indeed here at the end of November. Let's get into it. At the beginning of the season, the Blazers were like a historic level pressing team. Historic. They were pressing a ton early. More than anyone else, but more than anyone else by like just a gargantuan amount. 26 pressing possessions against the Clippers, 30 against the Lakers, 42 against the Jazz. No team in the NBA pressed more over the first 5 games than the Trailblazers, and they were dominant. They were fantastic in that stretch. They holding in possessions where they pressed, they were holding teams to an offensive rating of 76. They were the number 1 team in the league in turnovers. They were lighting teams up with this press, not giving up points in those press possessions. They were pushing like about 30% of their possessions in a game, but 27 a night. You play at roughly 100. But like this was exactly who they wanted to be. Then Matisse Thybulle gets hurt. Game 6, like halftime of Game 6, Blake Wesley gets hurt. These are sort of these like they're defensive, as JJ Redick has used the phrase. I've heard him say banshees, just like guys who play with their hair's on fire, who run around and wreak havoc. Like Matisse Thybulle is one of the great defensive playmakers in the league. He's averaging like 3 steals a game in his brief time before he hurt his thumb. And since that first 5 games, they have only had 1 game where they've pressed more than 15 possessions. So they were averaging 27 press possessions a game through the first 5. They were a very good defensive team. They were turning teams over. The press was really working. Their identity of who they wanted to be was really special, but it's 5 out of 82. You have 77 more. Injuries are going to happen. They're a natural part of this. Are they exacerbated by the style of play? I think we will get more clarity on what that kind of looks like over the next little bit, with more teams playing with pace and more teams pressing, but nobody was pressing like the Blazers. And I don't think Matisse Thybulle breaking his, fracturing a bone in his thumb is related in any way to pressing. You would have to be pretty stupid to believe that. But there's all types of stupid people. This show goes out on the internet. In any case, the first 5 games, they lose depth pieces that really make their defense special, right? They should be better on defense than they've been, but this was kind of allowed them to play their identity more, allowed them to go to these smaller lineups that really pressed and turned up the heat on people. Allowed them to have, say, if you have Chris Murray and Jeremy Grant and Matisse Thybulle and Blake Wesley off the bench, like 4+ defenders coming in, and just like not playing very many minutes with anyone who's like a truly negative defender. I think Shaedon Sharpe is not a very good defensive player, but he can be neutral, and if he's your worst defensive player at his size and athleticism, you can probably be pretty special. But they've really dialed it back since these injuries. And from the top turnover forcing team in the league, they have dropped over the last 10 games to 21st in opponent turnover rate. And they're averaging just 8.6 press possessions a game over their last 10 games. So from 27 a game to now down to less than 9 a game. And from first in opponent turnover rate to 21st. Yikes. But I mentioned in a previous episode last week that, like, very clearly, most of this change is personnel based. If you can't play the way you want to play, you have to change things up. So the Blazers have changed things up, right? They still, overall over the 15 game sample, because they were pressing wild at the beginning of the year, they're still the team that runs the most, on average, the most press possessions a game, and spends the most time in like percentage of their defensive possessions pressing, and they're still awesome at it, giving up a 79.6 offensive rating, or like 0.79 points per possession. It's an offensive rating, offensive rating being points per 100 possessions, just a normalized number at 79.6. But that's totally dropped off from 27 to 8. Like you need to look at the splits as opposed to overall. Overall, though, they're still, some teams will say nobody presses more than the Blazers, but that has drastically changed. Even at 8 a game over the last 10 games, they would be an above average team. Like the Raptors have played the second most press possessions in the league, third most press possessions on average in the league, and they press about 11 a game. The Pacers about 13 a game. The Blazers at 27 was unheard of, the number of possessions they were like truly pressing, really turning it up. So instead of pressing, now they're playing a ton of zone. In the first 5 games, when they had their dudes and they were playing the style that they wanted to play and the style that they sort of envisioned coming into the season, they played 2 total possessions of zone over the first 5 games. 2. They are averaging 12.3 possessions a game on the year, including 17, a little over 17.3 over the last 4. They have, they're averaging 12.3 since then. So they played 2 total possessions on the year. They still play zone, the third most of any team in the league, but because they have really leaned into it. In the last 10 games, about 12 possessions a night they're playing zone, and over the last 4 games, about 17 possessions a night they're playing zone. They are leaning into becoming one of the most zone-heavy teams in the entire league. They were the historic level highest pressing team in the league. They have really dialed that back to being like, yeah, we press some, and the Blazers will press and drop into the zone, and they are becoming a heavy zone team. The problem is the zone is not particularly good. On the whole, on the year, it's not bad. It's like average on defense. These numbers are via Synergy Sports. Thank you to the good folks at Synergy for tracking all this and giving me the data and the clips that I could look at quickly. They're average overall against the zone. But I think even now that they're even more beat up and no Drew Holiday, and they didn't have Rob in the last game, you're just playing. When you're playing really young guys, the zone needs to communicate. And against Chicago, the zone got freaking torched. The Blazers had 12 half-court possessions against the Bulls where they played zone, and the Bulls scored on 6 of them for a cool 2.5 points per possession. The league average is something like 1.4 or so, one in that range, 1.14. And the Blazers giving up 2.5. It's like the Bulls just they got whatever they wanted, right? They even on some possessions they missed. It's like they got the exact shot they wanted out of the zone, and Javon Carter misses a three. The Bulls torched him. So what did they do? And I think this is important. They stopped doing that. They went back to who they are. They basically didn't press in the first couple quarters, right? And then they find themselves against the Bulls, trailing, down 18. Eventually, they're down 16 heading into the fourth, down 21 at some point, 3 minutes into the quarter. And they just played their best defensive players. They played a lineup of Denny Avdia, Chris Murray, and Jeremy Grant, Tamani Kamara, and Donovan Clingan. They rode those dudes for the rest of the quarter. They started pressing again. They pressed more in the fourth quarter than they had in the first three quarters combined. They didn't play a single possession of zone. They played man-to-man. They picked up full court, but not a ton, right? But picked up a little bit of full court pressure and played a ton of just half-court straight-up man-to-man. They are still, on the whole, playing something like 75 to 85% of their possessions each night in half-court man-to-man, right? Like even with the uptick in zone, it's just... They've switched to who they are because of some personnel changes. And I want to talk about a little more about this Bulls game, and I want to play you some audio from Thiago Splitter in the second segment, because I asked him specifically about the changes in forcing turnovers, and he discussed switching from a pressing team to a team that plays a bunch more zone. I think his answer is illuminating for a couple different reasons, and we'll do that in the second segment. Join me there, won't ya? First, though, let's talk about Quo. Listen, if you're a business owner, you know this very well. Missed calls are going to be the thing that could spoil a deal, spoil you making money. When a customer tries to reach you and can't get through, that's money slipping away. Quo, that's spelled Quo, is the smarter way to run your business communications so you never miss an opportunity. Quo is the #1 business phone system built for 2025, not 1995. It's simple, modern, and designed to help you communicate faster, look more professional, and stay connected wherever you're working. So Quo works right from an app on your phone. It works for an app on your computers. So there's no extra devices and there's no clunky landlines at your office. Instead, it works the way your business actually works, which is on your phone and on your laptop. And your whole team can share one number and collaborate on calls and texts like a shared inbox, which means customers get help faster. You get responses when people try to reach you. Everyone on your team can see it's happening. They can jump in where holes need to be filled. It makes small businesses feel big and big businesses feel efficient. No wonder over 90,000 businesses are already using Quo. And you can try Quo for free at quo.com/LockedOnNBA. That's QUO.com/LockedOnNBA. And yes, you can even keep your existing number. Quo. No missed calls, no miss customers. Today's program also brought to you by DoorDash. The NBA season is rolling along. It's heating up even. And DoorDash has found the perfect way to keep fans in their bag all season long. So whether you're watching the Fighting Pinwheels or highlights from your favorite players or your fantasy team across the league, players on your fantasy team, I guess, DoorDash makes every game night even better. DoorDash is the official on-demand delivery platform of the NBA, and they're celebrating with something called the Bag Drop. Every time an NBA player scores 50 points in a game, DoorDash drops 50% off your order with Dash Pass the next day, and you're automatically entered for a chance to win the Ultimate Fan Bag. We're talking player-inspired drip, exclusive gear, and stuff you'll actually want. DoorDash has you covered for late-night highlights, last-minute watch parties, and double OT fuel up. So next time someone goes off for 50, use that promo code NBA50 the next day to get 50% off on DoorDash with Dash Pass, plus your shot at the bag drop. Dash Pass members only, 50% off up to $10 the day after a 50-point game with promo code. Terms apply. No purchase necessary. Ends April 13th. Open to U.S. residents 21 or older. Visit DoorDashInYourBag.com for full details. DoorDash, in your bag all season long. All right. So I think this is I think this change is notable because the change is really about personnel. They couldn't press. They just couldn't press the way they wanted to because they've gotten because they have they don't have dudes who can do it. So they have switched their identity. But part of me wonders, right? Why? The zone has been average recently with less players, with playing younger players, more developmental players with more injuries and less players available. The zone has looked worse. It seems like even there are moments when the zone is a nice change of pace, but I think more often than not with this group, it has given teams just sort of let them in to get a comfort jump shots. Maybe it's kept teams out of the paint a little bit, but you're giving up comfort jump shots, and in a league that is obsessed with shooting 3-pointers, comfort jump shots ain't exactly a good plan. So I asked Thiago Splitter about this prior to the Bulls game at his pregame media availability. I asked kind of my angle of my question was like, what happened to the turnovers, dog? Like, do you think, like, when you're watching film, where has that gone? And he kind of said, like, well, we can't play the way we want to play. And then he talks a little bit about pressing and zone defense and kind of why they've gone where they've gone. I want to play you that audio now. Here's Thiago Splitter kind of discussing the nature of the Blazers' changing defense.
Haven't turned teams over as much as you did early in the season. When you look at the defensive film, do you feel like there are places you are missing, or why haven't you been able to do that as often?
Well, one of them is not being able to share the minutes how I want. Guys have to play too many minutes, so it's tough for me to ask too many to play 38, 40 minutes and go 94 feet and pressure. It's hard. That's why it's almost impossible to do it. But if he plays 28, 27, well, and then you have more guys on the mix that can do the same thing, when you have Matisse Thybulle, and it's just different. It's really hard to play that way with less bodies. It's a little bit on that too.
So you feel like those turnovers were coming mostly with the press, like in full court, as opposed to getting in.
Yeah, I think it's part of it. It's also part of other teams adapting to it. But I don't want to change our identity. I don't want to change. But of course, when you play so many minutes, you got to go zone. So we go to the zone now more. You guys notice this. So we got to back up and kind of like be on the zone. That takes out of the pressure, less turnovers, and kind of like maybe taking the other team out of the rhythm, the shots they want. Some games we make money out of the zone. Some games we got killed. I'm not going to lie. So we just got to be smart. When we do it, what's the moment of the game, and just try to adjust over there in the moment.
That's interesting stuff from Splitter. Some of it's obvious, right? He says, like, we just don't have enough guys who can play the same way, so you can't just like lean into doing things the way you've always done it. Like, you have to be earnest and honest about what you are capable of. But I think his follow-up, when I said, like, so, you feel like you just haven't been able to turn teams over because because the press is where you were getting it done, and without that pressure defense, you can't be a turnover team, because that's like the reason that the Blazers have been good, right? Is that they limit 3-point attempts, they turn teams over. They obviously last year even they gave up a high number of shots at the rim, but they protected the rim very well. That was kind of the secret of their success, was even the volume was there, that they protected the rim very well. They could improve on that for sure this season, but turnovers, limit 3-point attempts, which is just like pressure defense on the perimeter, right? Like that's the secret sauce. Like, that's why they were a top 5 defense for 41 games last year. And I assumed that they would be somewhere in that, 7 to 10 range this year with upgraded defensive personnel and a half year of experience under their belts, and et cetera, et cetera. They haven't been. Some of that is certainly health. Some of that I think is just they've slipped a little bit. I think like it's the unknown variable is just like Chauncey Billups isn't coaching this team, and it's hard to exactly see how it works. Although Nate Bjorkgren was in charge of the defense, and that dude's still there in charge of the defense. Like, Blazers is associate head coach or whatever he is, lead assistant, Nate Bjorkgren. It is. I think that variable is hard to tell, and maybe it is the change in coaching and something to do with Splitter. But I think that's like a variable I can't really speak to so early into the Splitter tenure. I'll have probably a better feel once we get 30 or so games into this, how different I think it is, and once we see a team play with like more consistent health, et cetera, et cetera. But I think his answer on going zone, and that's kind of like, there's two ways to kind of read it. My read, when I first heard him say it, my thought was like, did he just say that they went zone because they need to rest? Like it's because it's too hard to play pressure defense and they kind of like need to take time off. That was like my initial read when I heard it in the room. But since then I've listened back to it, 4 or 5 times, including just now with y'all. And my feel is that what he's actually saying there is that what the Blazers' philosophy is on defense is they need a change of pace. They do not want to show teams the exact same thing for 100 offensive possessions a game, right? They whatever it might be, 80 to 100 offensive possessions a game. They're like, no, let's not do that. Let's show them a different look. So sometimes it was pressing. Obviously, the pressing was at a crazy high level, and now it's zone because they want to give different looks. And he says, sometimes we've made money with the zone, and sometimes we've got, sometimes we've got killed. But like, I think it's important. The differences there is like, I think what he's saying is like, we believe, like as a staff, our theory is that we want to show teams a different look, and their zone is not designed to be a heavy turnover zone. Their zone is a change of pace zone. It's a take teams out of their comfort zone. It's all those things, and it's not particularly good because it's not this ball hawking, turnover forcing type of like pressured zone. It is not intended to be that. But I think it's interesting. This is more speaks to their sort of philosophy as a team. They want to change things up. And now, the Blazers, as I mentioned, they're third in the league on the season in zone in number of percentage of time they've played zone. They're fourth overall in number of possessions a game, just behind the Miami Heat. Among those top 4 teams, they're the worst defensive team. In terms of points per possession, Denver is the 5th most frequent, but they're kind of a drop off from these heavy zone teams, and they're pretty bad on with their zone defense. So like Portland they have from games 1 through 5 to now, 6 through 15, they've drastically changed what they want to be. And I think it speaks to how they want to show teams different stuff. They are committed to the changeup. The changeup hasn't been very good, but they're committed to it. Speaking of committed to it, they're headed out for 3 games on the road. Let's talk about those road games. Golden State, Oklahoma City, and Milwaukee. Join me in that third segment. We'll do that to close the show. Before we do that, though, I want to tell you that today's program is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks, super easy. Super fun. You make decisions every day, but when you are right, PrizePicks will reward you. And now that we've got NBA games, now we've got NFL games, there's no better time to jump in on the action. Now, if you haven't tried PrizePicks yet, simple, super fun way to play. You just pick more or less on at least 2 player stats, and if you get them right, you win. It takes less than 60 seconds to make your lineup, and you can play anywhere PrizePicks operates, including right here in the great state of Oregon, as well as California, Texas, Georgia. You can even now use their new feature, Stacks, so you can pick more on Deni Avdija's rebounds, more on Deni Avdija's assists, more on Deni Avdija's points, all in the same lineup. So download the PrizePicks app today and use the code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. You don't even have to win. That's code LOCKEDONNBA for $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. It's good to be right. Today's program is also brought to you by the good folks over there at DUER. You know what they're doing? They're making really comfortable pants. My favorite jeans, my DUER jeans. The performance denim from DUER is really comfortable. It looks sleek, and it lets you just do what you want to do. DUER jeans have 5 times the stretch of traditional denim. They combine the classic jeans wear style with the kind of comfort and performance you get from athletic wear. It's the best of both worlds. DUER are the pioneers of blending technical innovation with everyday clothing. They invented performance denim. So these jeans look great, feel great. They're super comfortable if you're just lounging around the house and doing nothing. But if you are out there living your life, whether you're being active and kind of and like moving around and doing stuff, or you need to look nice, say at a work event or going out for dinner and drinks with friends, DUER will be your go-to garments, your go-to pants for all of those activities with a great deal of comfort. Simply put, DUER makes the world's most comfortable pants without having to sacrifice style. Trust me. Once you try these, they'll be your go-to. And you can check out DUER right here in Portland on 23rd, 820 Northwest 23rd Avenue, the DUER store. Go check them out and pick up a pair for yourself or as an amazing holiday gift. And you can mention my promo code in store, Locked on Portland. You get 15% off your first order, or check them out online at shopduer.com/lockedonportland for 15% off. That's shopduer.com/lockedonportland. Still a pass first point guard. I'm still Mike Richmond. You still listen to Locked On Blazers. Blazers head out on a road trip. Golden State, followed by Oklahoma City Sunday, Monday against the Bucks. Warriors are a cup game. The Blazers are they got blasted in the last cup game by the Rockets. If they're going to have any hope of advancing in the NBA Cup, making it to Vegas, chasing a trophy, there's a must win on Friday. And it's a must win that comes with the Warriors, who have been scuffling lately, getting a little bit more healthy. Steph Curry, who had an ankle injury earlier this week, tweaked his ankle, missed a game on Wednesday, is not on the injury report, cleared to play. His name does not appear on the official injury report. He should be back. Jonathan Kuminga will not play in that game. He's out with knee tendonitis. And Jimmy Butler and Draymond Green, who missed the previous game for the Warriors, are listed as probable along with Buddy Hield. But the Blazers injury list remains long. All your usual suspects still out. Matisse Thybulle, Blake Wesley, Scoot Henderson. Believe it or not, Damian Lillard is not going to play a single minute this year, also out. But Jeremy Grant's listed as probable. He played. He played on Wednesday night. He's going to play. Drew Holiday, who was listed as doubtful heading into Wednesday's game, has been upgraded to questionable with a right calf strain. I think that's probably the right direction. It's hard to know if Drew will play, but questionable, better than doubtful. Shaedon Sharpe listed on the injury report, questionable with a right calf strain. Again, that is a new injury for Sharpe. Previously, he had missed or been on the injury report with a left calf strain. He's now popping up with something on the other side. He clearly hurt it or aggravated it or I think hurt it. I was probably the right way to say it. Against the Suns on Tuesday, and then didn't play Wednesday. We shall see. Another name I have a very heavy heart and side eye at this one. Rob Williams listed as questionable with a right knee injury management. Once Rob had been cleared to play, since he came back and was back, and like made his debut against the Nuggets on October 31st, his Halloween debut. What he told us was his favorite holiday. Was he hadn't been on the injury report. Like, obviously, he's limited minutes wise, not playing him a ton of minutes, but he hadn't been on the injury report. He hadn't shown up there. Then he misses a back-to-back, the second night of a back-to-back, which is totally normal. He might play. Maybe they're just doing this to be coy because he didn't play Wednesday night or whatever. But I do not like seeing Rob's name there. It's just, I feel for Rob Williams. I want him to be healthy, right? He's just had such a tough go of it. Okay, so Warriors are probably going to have their full complement of dudes. I guess no JK, no Kuminga, but and the Blazers might be really beat up. And if Blazers are really beat up, it just is what it is. They're good. It's going to be tough for them, right? It's uphill sledding. Oklahoma City is the best team in the league. They're fantastic. Sunday night in what will be an afternoon game here locally, but it tips off in the evening in Oklahoma City. That's a brutal game. Very hard. Monday, the Bucks are without Giannis Antetokounmpo. Almost certainly. He got hurt last Monday, and he was deemed out 1 to 2 weeks with a groin injury. So I guess technically Monday's game is exactly 1 week, but he's not going to play. This is my guess. Very, very, very unlikely to have Giannis. So the Bucks that's a winnable game, but it's the second night of a back-to-back. It's to travel, Oklahoma City to Milwaukee. It's not your easiest you want your easy game to be the first of this trip, right? You want to, if you're going to say who's the worst team we play, put them early in the trip. So so you can really increase your chances of a win. But as opposed to the second night of a back-to-back. All that said, the Blazers might run there. Portland has lost 4 in a row. Warriors doesn't look likely. OKC seems unlikely. They might be looking at a 6-game losing streak heading into a second night of a back-to-back Monday against the Bucks. But I'm telling you right now, if you thought this team was a play-in team, and I said on the show in preview shows in like August and September that I thought the Blazers were like pretty clearly the 11th best team in the West with a chance to be better than that. But I thought there were, there's 4 teams that are just definitely worse than them. So like they're pretty comfortably at least the 11th best team in the West. And if you're 11th best team in the West, 10 teams play postseason basketball. If you make it to 10th, which doesn't seem like much of a reward, you make the play-in. While that might, I don't think that's necessarily something to celebrate wholeheartedly. The Blazers, stated goal is to play postseason basketball, right? They're aiming to be competitive. So if you thought this was a play-in team at the beginning of the season, even as dark as it seems right now, and even if they might be looking at, 6-12 heading back home, conceivably if they lose all these games, I think realistically, let's say they beat the Bucks, right? That would so they're 7-11 heading home. The bottom of the West stinks. The Blazers are still in totally reasonable position to make the play, and I'm still, even with all of their warts and the defense kind of really struggling and like changing its stripes but not actually being effective, the Pelicans are not good. The Kings lost Domantas Sabonis tonight to a knee injury, on Thursday it was announced he's to a knee injury. He's going to miss several weeks. The Mavericks are probably going to tank. They're 4-12. The Clippers have lost 3 in a row. I'm kind of like a Clippers believer for no reason, but they're incredibly old. They're just like, they're fragile, and they've been awful this year. The Grizzlies have horrendous vibes and a bunch of injury concerns. They're 5-11. The Jazz owe a top 8 protected pick to Oklahoma City. Now they're 5-9, right behind the Blazers now, but you better believe they are going to get that pick, or at least work hard to not be in danger of very obviously losing that pick. The Jazz, at some point, will stop playing Svi Mihajlovic and start playing players that are worse than him, right? Just like it's a very simple tweak. Hey, Ace Bailey, you get to play 29 minutes a night now, right? They'll just lean into being younger and worse. It's just like, as good as Keontae George and Larry Markkinen have been, like, the Jazz are going to get worse. I know it. It's just, it just is like, they'll just stop playing Yusuf Nurkic and like lean into being a lot worse up front. I'm not worried about them. They want to lose and they'll get there. Portland might be in a world of hurt when we get to Thanksgiving. I think this stretch from the middle of, the third week of November to Christmas, this is going to be a daunting stretch for the Blazers. But if you thought they were a play-in team, just look at the standings and the reality facing those other teams in the West. Certainly, they still could be a play-in team. I think they're likely to be a play-in team, even with all of this mess that they're going through. They do not look like a good basketball team right now at all, and they're incredibly beat up. But I'm telling you, if your expectations were for them to finish 9th or 10th, nothing has changed. Do not panic. 15 games in, they are perfectly on pace to finish 9th or 10th in the West. Go ahead and book it. Enjoy the games this weekend. Warriors and then Thunder on Sunday. So next time you hear my voice, we will talk both of those games. We'll talk Golden State and we'll talk Oklahoma City. Probably in your feeds. That game's like a 4:30 start on Sunday. So probably in your feeds a pretty late Sunday night or first thing Monday morning, depending on what happens in my home before I hit record. Tell your friends about the podcast 5 days a week, wherever you get podcasts, also on YouTube. I appreciate you listening. I will talk to you soon.